Welcome to Unlearn the Crap TV with your host, Kathy Baldwin. Unlearn the Crap TV is more than just a show. It's a movement towards breaking free from the disempowering structures designed to benefit the few at the expense of the many. It's about education, healing, and unlearning the detrimental beliefs that have been ingrained in society for generations. So now, please welcome the host of Unlearn the Crap TV, Kathy Baldwin.
Welcome to another episode of Unlearn the Crap and Level Up. Your soul is calling. I'm your host, Kathy Baldwin. And as you know, Unlearn the Crap is about the conditioned responses and automatic programming that affect our internal processes from our mind, our heart, our gut. But it also affects our hormones, our stress level, our central nervous system, and even our gut microbiome that will affect our health. Because what is happening within our body, with our thoughts, our feelings, all of that biochemistry, is the direct reflection of our outer world and our experiences. And if we're not satisfied with our outer reality, how we're succeeding in our health, wealth, and relationships, our businesses, then we must go inward in order to extract our power and bring the best of ourselves to us. I am so excited for this conversation. Patricia, before we get started, could you please tell us what crap you needed to unlearn so that you could level up?
The thing I needed to unlearn the most was that I was good enough and that I needed to trust myself more and not rely on other people telling me what to do next.
Absolutely. I love that in so many ways. And we're going to delve into all of this and how you unlearned it and how you're leveling up. But first, before we do, could you please tell the audience who you are? And now that you've unlearned this crap, how are you leveling up and serving the world?
Yeah, I'm Patricia Stepler, and I am a mentor for entrepreneurs and for small business owners. And what I love to do is to help them get results. And most of my clients, they're looking for the financial results. And, you know, a lot of that, when you were just talking about, you know, your outside world, your inside world, you know, we really have to decide what kind of reality we want. And then we have to figure out how to get there. So I help my clients do that. Most people hire me because they're looking to earn more money. And so that's where a lot of my focus is, how to get them there, how to have the right people working with them.
Oh, that is so critical in today's world. We are living in a time where everything is changing. Our systems are changing, our workforce, our geopolitical, our economic, and it's all coming down to the personal empowerment, because part of the crap we were taught was to put our trust in an external company. You know, let us take care of you. Let us give you your paycheck. Let us give you your retirement package. And you just release all power and control. Well, that was wonderful in the 50s and 60s when that would last a lifetime. But we're not in that place anymore, are we?
No, we are not. The world's changing so rapidly.
Absolutely. So tell me the backstory. How did you come about this epiphany that says it is crap that you're not good enough, that it is crap that you're supposed to put your well-being, your financial stability in somebody else's hands?
Well, to be honest, I was part of what you were just talking about, you know, working for a company, trusting them for your retirement and so on. And when my son, who was my third child, was was 12, he told me I didn't need to save my money to put him through college and that he was going to get a scholarship. And even though I didn't really believe him, I let him believe him and let him believe in his little fantasy, so to speak, that as I called it. And I kept saving for him to go to college. Now, at the time, my oldest daughter was in college. My second child was, she was about to go to college. So I think he saw this financial strain because, as you said, you're working for a company and you know, I was a school teacher and could only get so much money, you know, whatever my pay scale was. And so as my son kept telling me he was getting this scholarship, and he wanted to be a collegiate athlete, so I knew how unlikely that was because he was also a type 1 diabetic. So I knew he had, you know, several factors going against him just there. So when he got a full college scholarship, I had to figure out how he did it because I'd had enough personal growth to realize that he had caused it. I just didn't know how. And that set me on my own journey. And what I started to realize, you know, I was so excited for him getting the scholarship, but so angry with myself because I had done, you know, at that point, 20, 25 years of personal development. And I didn't see those kind of results because I was working for somebody else. And you're limited no matter, you know, what you're doing when you're working and depending on somebody else's, you know, pay scale. And so while I was thrilled for him, I had to figure out what he had done so that I could, you know, see those kind of results for myself. And that actually led me into starting my own business because I realized how many other people were just like me. You know, they were working for somebody else, or even if they had their own business, they had limiting beliefs. And so they had to overcome them. And so that led me to building my own business and, you know, realizing that I'm responsible for who I am and for what I get out of life and for where my life takes me. And to allow the outside world to dictate all that isn't going to get me to my dreams.
Absolutely. Can I say, first of all, how incredibly inspired and impressed I am with you that you were living within that confines of that society and that system, but you did not try to make your son become realistic or get his head out of the clouds or try to be kind and minimize his expectations, which is what so many of us were taught to do. Get your head out of the clouds, stop daydreaming, put your nose to the grindstone. Instead, whether you believed it or not, you allowed him to flourish.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, and I did that. I never discouraged him. I never told him I didn't believe him. I just, when he would tell me, you know, time and time again, he was getting a scholarship, I'd just give him a hug and thank him. And, you know, but I never believed it.
But that, even just what you just said, you helped cement that belief into his central nervous system by connecting the physicality of the hug and thanking him and allowing him to see that it was possible and it was appreciated, and you helped bring it alive for him.
Well, and here's the funny thing. He told me, of course, you know, several years later when I was explained to him what he had done, he said, well, I told you I was going to do it. I better figure out how to do it. What if all of us took that attitude? We say we're going to do something and we have that kind of commitment and that kind of decision making that we say, well, if I said I'm going to do it, I better figure out how to get there.
Well, that is the key to it all, is once we make a decision, our decision is the pivot point that opens the door. It connects to our amygdala and our reticular activating system that says, okay, a decision has been made. We now need to find the resources. And now we set about physical reactions within our brain that connect us to the how. But so many people think they have to have the how figured out before they make the decision.
Right. You're exactly right. And that's one thing. So I was trained by Bob Proctor, and that's one of the things he always says, you know, you don't need to know the how. You just need to know what you want. And for my son,
Absolutely.
it was, he developed a plan, but first he decided I'm getting a scholarship. And then, he researched, he discovered the plan, and that's what we all need to do.
Absolutely. And that is part of what I believe. Well, first of all, I love Bob Proctor. He was one of my early mentors as well. And as somebody from Toronto, and he was born and raised in Toronto, I've always had a very special feeling for Bob Proctor and what he's done for the personal development world. I want to come back to something you had said before, because I, like you, had spent well over 40 years in the personal development, the personal empowerment space. I studied under so many people, from Bob Proctor to neurologists, to spirituality, quantum physics, you name it. But that education was feeding my mental curiosity and my desire to learn, but that's not the same as integration.
Yes. And so in all the personal development I'd done, and I call it more traditional, it never really got into the universal laws. I'd never heard of the law of attraction during all those decades of learning. And it was just like setting goals, setting sub goals, things like that. But it was not, it was nothing more than an intellectual activity. It's just writing it down and, not really even focusing on it. And so when my son got that scholarship, I knew I was missing a piece. And that's when I discovered Bob Proctor. I'd heard his name, but had never had the opportunity in any of the conventions or talks that I'd gone to. I never had seen one of his books or anything like that. So when I heard him speak for the first time on the internet, I was like, this man knows the answers to what I'm seeking. And that's when I was pulled towards him. And then, I just couldn't get enough of what he was teaching because it was so different. Because I'd never heard anybody talk about, how you had to change your thought patterns and you had to overcome those limiting beliefs. And, you have these habitual behaviors that you do that maybe are not serving you well. Certainly a lot of them do serve us well, but some of them don't. And I never heard anybody speak like that. And so that's the piece I was needing. And then I could explain to my son what he had done. So I did know from all that personal development, I always felt like I was a better person. I felt like I was a better mom. And that's why I did not discourage my son, because I knew I had no right to steal somebody else's dream. Even though I didn't believe it, he never knew that. He never knew I didn't believe him.
Thank goodness for that, because
Exactly.
he's changed his life, but your life, and in the whole circle of everything, you're now changing other people's lives.
Yes.
Let's talk about the universal laws, because the universal laws were absolutely pivotal in my book, Unlearn the Crap, and what this entire podcast is about. Because I believe that we were taught better how to drive a car. We were taught the rules of the road. I mean, before you got to get your license, you had to have a book and study and know what the rules of the road were, so that you were working with the traffic flow. But yet we weren't taught that about the universal laws. And even the law of attraction, I believe that's an effect, not a cause. My favorite universal laws are, well, I have three. The law of polarity, which allows us to totally look at the other side of the coin, because everything has a polar opposite. The law of relativity, which allows us to choose our perspective so that something is either empowering or disempowering. And then the law of gestation, which says the timing is not our business and that everything requires a gestation period. And so get rid of our shoulds and expectations. What universal law was really instrumental in your own development and unlearning of the crap?
I think those three laws you were talking about were absolutely pivotal. But I wanted to just say something because, we learn about gravity, which is again a universal law. And that one we learn in school. We see that. But you are exactly right. We do not learn about these ones that can absolutely change your life. And, we have to realize, that everything, our, our lives are based on our beliefs. And I love, that you're talking about perspective. I think that is one of a huge thing that most people don't look at. They don't look at, okay, well, I've had these experiences, so I have a certain perspective of how I go about doing things. But somebody else has different experiences and different ideas, and they're just as valued as what yours are. So, how do we relate to those people? And I think that's something we often miss because so much, and I see this a lot more today than maybe 10 years ago, where, it's got to be my way. This is the way you do it. And if you don't believe the same thing I believe, you're wrong. And that's just so untrue. But I also love, what you brought up about the law of gestation, because that's when people get really frustrated. They set a goal, and they set a goal for maybe 90 days. And, we live in this instantaneous world, so we expect things to happen very quickly. But you don't know what things you don't know. And the universe does know what you don't know. And so sometimes we get really frustrated and then we give up because we think it should happen. And yet we have experiences that we need to go through that we were not aware of. And I think that's where, when I said the beginning, trusting myself a little more, not believing everything other people said, because they were at different levels. And I always felt in my business, I was putting the cart before the horse, because I was trying to do things I was not ready for. And that just leads to a lot of frustration. And I see a lot of people I work with doing the exact same thing. They're trying to get to a higher level, but they haven't gone through, and not that you have to go through step by step, but they haven't gone through something that enables them to reach it with ease.
Absolutely. My favorite example of gestation is pregnancy, because we know and expect that it is a 9-month, 40-week time period. And there is nothing that would want us to speed up that process and have that child be delivered at 6 months. We would say, no, that hasn't gone through enough. It hasn't developed its lungs. It hasn't developed all of this. It needs to happen in the time. But yet we put these external shoulds and expectations when we're building businesses or trying something new. And it's all based on what you said, our desire for instantaneous results. Sorry, I tripped over my tongue there.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. We live in that kind of a world, where we can talk to somebody. Like I can talk to my son who's in Japan now, and it's like no big deal. And yet when I was a kid, we had a Japanese exchange student that lived with us, and that was a huge deal back in those times and very, very expensive. I can talk to my son. It doesn't cost me anything, and it's so different. So our world has changed so rapidly. And Darren Hardy, I was listening to something he spoke about one day, and he says, 1 year today is like 100 years in previous times. And that's just how rapidly, it's probably even faster than that now, because it's like every day is new. And because of that, I think we don't realize that how important that gestation period really is.
Absolutely. But let's be clear, the decision is the creation of whatever it is. The gestation period is only to take it from the energetic to the physical. That is the only
Mhm.
thing. Once it's created, it is created. I I love being able to help people see that that thought, that that decision is creation. And the way I like to explain it is, have you ever had one of those ideas where you say, oh, this is the world changing idea? It's fantastic. And then a few years down the road where you haven't done anything, all of a sudden that idea pops up and you say, hey, I thought of that years ago. If only I had done it. Well, you created it, but you dropped it before you brought it to manifestation. And
Absolutely.
I think that is so critical when people are becoming entrepreneurs and they want to create, is they have to understand that the decision, the imagination, the thought process of what they want to create is actually the creation process. The rest is just taking it from creation to the physical manifestation.
You know, that it just impacts me so much because I have two friends who both invented something they saw a need for, but that's all they did. They never took it beyond. And then when that invention came out, they're like, oh, I did that. I did that before, but they didn't act on it. And then I even listened to this recording of Napoleon Hill talking about his Think and Grow Rich book. And he was saying that, he was giving a seminar one day and this guy came up kind of disheveled with papers all, around him. And this man said, I put this same philosophy together, but he didn't do anything with it. So you are exactly right. That idea is out there and you're given it. But if you don't act on it, somebody else is going to get it because
Uh,
somebody else will, that energy, that thought will go to somebody else that will act. So when you get an idea, you better act on it quickly because the universe
ab-
loves speed.
Absolutely. And just because you drop it does not take away its creation.
Right.
Yeah, I know for me, I created a business and I called it Feast of Friends. And I was so excited about it because I felt that the world was too much in social media. And that was like 20 some odd years ago. And at that time, I thought we were too much in social media and that we weren't actually in the real world. And so I created this whole ecosystem to introduce people. But after a certain amount of time and energy, I dropped it. Well, we know Meetup is massive. And so
Mhm.
that idea was born and created, and Meetup took it. It took it from where I dropped it and developed it. And how many times are you working with people who have that spark of inspiration, that calling, that desire to build and create something entrepreneurial, something unique? But they're letting fear or their crap conditioned responses and thought patterns take them out.
And they're also allowing the how to get in the way because they don't know how and they can't see, you know, where they need to go next. They drop it instead of allowing the world to show them, and I think some of that is, and I go back to that traditional personal development I went through, that it was very much you needed to know the steps. And yet we don't need to know the steps. We just need to know what we want and then focus on that and allow the ideas to come to us.
Absolutely. But it's also more than that because part of the crap that we've been taught is that we're supposed to know it all, do it all by ourselves. But yet we are human beings that come from community, that come from collaboration. This disempowerment that we are currently living in, this system of isolation and individualism, is part of what is breaking down. And so the rise up of people like you that we can bring into our dreams to help facilitate and grow them is not an indulgence. It is not a sign of failure. It is a sign of empowerment that says, I am going to bring all of the resources that I need to take this creation and bring it to life.
Right. And I think that's one thing that Bob Proctor always talked about was that when you've made the decision and you start moving, the people and the resources will appear. And I don't think enough people are told that. They do feel like they have to do it all themselves. It's one of those things where you have to do it yourself, but you can't do it yourself. And you just have to accept that other people will impact you one way or another. But as long as you make the decision and you start moving, and I think that's another key thing. A lot of times people, and The Secret gave this idea that all you have to do is think about it and then it will happen. No, you have to move. You have to act. And, I think realizing that you just have to start moving, doing something each day to get you a little closer to where you want to be. And as you do that, it's coming towards you. Because like you mentioned earlier, once you've made that decision, it's there. It's a matter of you just reaching out and taking it.
Absolutely. So I want to bring the conversation for those who are listening to understand that if this conversation is sparking something in them, if they've had the question, yeah, but how do I do this? Or I want it, but, and all the yeah, but start coming up. This conversation is one of those signs. We think it's supposed to be something really big, right?
Yes. And I don't think there's any accidents. When you meet somebody, there's a reason for it. Like, why was it that I'd heard of the name Bob Proctor 25 years or whatever, but had never run into him? Because I wasn't ready for that. I probably would not have appreciated him at that point. And when that happened, there was a reason for it. So I always believe, like you and I having this conversation today, there is a reason for it. And I think of that so often when I meet somebody, why did we connect? What's the reason for that? Because I don't think things happen by accident. And sometimes we may not be fully aware of it at the time, but later on we might look back and say, this happened because of, and then you figure it out and you kind of pull it all together. Sometimes you may never pull together why you met somebody or why some event happened that you were there. And then we just start to, just go on with our lives, but there's generally a reason for it.
Absolutely. And in our ego focused world, we think everything is supposed to be about us, but we don't understand that sometimes we're the gift for somebody else. And if we don't see the reason for it, it could be it's not ours, that we're the gift for somebody else. And if we can take a look at what is happening to us without labels, without judgments, and be able to say, okay, this is happening. It's happening for a reason. What am I supposed to see? Am I being redirected? Is something trying to come into my focus? Because we are energetic, biochemical, electromagnetic beings. And so if something has come into our consciousness, into our thought patterns, then it's for a reason. And we need to take a look at it and see what the gifts are, right?
Yes, I think you're quite right. We need to do that. And the other thing we can always keep in mind is in one of my favorite books, The Science of Getting Rich, talks about leaving everybody with the impression of increase. Do we ever take time to think about how we can just make somebody else have a better day because they've met us and we've maybe said something kind to them? And I think, even when we're talking, so often we talk about people being bullies. What if we just switch that around and say, how can I be kind to somebody? How can I leave everybody feeling better for having met me.
Yes, yes, yes. You just exemplified one of my favorite quotes from Gandhi: be the change. Instead of pointing the finger at what someone else is doing, what can I do? How can I make this different? How can I connect and collaborate? I believe with every ounce of my fiber that the power is within us.
Yes, I do. I believe that too. And I think that when we can reach out to somebody else and show that kindness, then it's like a ripple effect. You know, if everybody did that, think what kind of a peaceful, kind world we'd be in today.
Yeah. Yes, that is my utopia. That is my reason why I do what I do here in this podcast and why I write my books and everything, is because I believe that when we're all living in our true aligned soul, living from our authenticity, from our purpose, living with peace, then that is what we give to the world. What is it? There's a parable or one of those things about if you bump into somebody while you're holding a cup of coffee and you spill coffee on them, what was the reason that they had coffee on them? And so many people say, well, because you bumped into them or this happened. And it's like, no, it's because the cup had coffee in it. What if what we were spilling out into the world was the very best of ourselves because
Mm-hmm.
we were living our truth?
Yeah, I think that's very deep, and you know that's very true. You know, and I think we don't often think about that. Um, and I think, well, I just know as a school teacher, every year, every fall, we would talk about bullying, but you always took it from the aspect of being a bully, and even though you're trying to prevent that, what always happened was there were more incidents of bullying. And I'm thinking, you know, well, what if we had switched that to what can we do to leave everybody with an impression of increase? How could that have impacted the children far more by thinking of what they could do for somebody else to make them feel good and take that off of themselves, you know, what they're feeling, but put it on somebody else and make somebody else feel good. Even if it's just saying, you know, how nice you look, or that color looks great on you, or, you know, something very simple. Just you can see when you say something kind to somebody, how they just kind of straighten up and they, you know, you see it in their face. They're, you know, excited that somebody even noticed them.
Yeah. Patricia, how do you take these principles of life, of empowerment, of alignment, universal laws, and help entrepreneurs bring that into their business so that they are aligned and can thrive? How do you do that?
So I use a lot of the ideas that Bob Proctor used in thinking into results, and how we take that, whatever idea it is, and how, you know, we really have to set the right kind of goal. And when we set the right kind of goal, something that inspires us, something that excites us, something we do not know how to do, something that's bigger than us, then, you know, in a sense, we take the eyes off ourselves and we're looking more outward into the world. And then we do get through that alignment, but we have to make it feel like it's natural. It has to feel so comfortable, and which is why I put together this little guide about, you know, having a $35,000 month. And it's not that maybe that's a big thing. Maybe that's more than somebody can believe. Maybe it's not enough, you know, that somebody can believe. But the point is, you have to change something within yourself until that feels natural. So how do we go about changing what we think of ourselves, how we believe we are, and, you know, who do we need to become to make that feel so natural? Because as long as, let's say, a $35,000 a month feels like it's just too unbelievable, it will be, and you won't
Absolutely.
accomplish it. But once you make it feel so natural and you see the kind of person you need to be in order to accomplish it, then you've changed yourself. And when you change yourself, you're also interacting with other people differently. And I think that's what I really love, is that when you become somebody different, everybody around you is also becoming a little different because you're interacting differently with them.
Absolutely. I want to use you and your story as an example of what you just talked about, because you were part of the social structure of the education system. You were a teacher, which meant you were teaching a curriculum. You had a certain set of rules and expectations. You had timelines put on you. You had schedules put on you. And I'm sure as a teacher within that environment, as you were saving, scrimping and saving so that your children could have payments for their education and whatever it is that you wanted, that this $35,000 a month as an entrepreneur could seem like, yeah, that's for other people. But every step you take towards that makes that more realistic and more attainable. And we're changing our belief system and our set points every step we take, that it might not be 100% until it, well, actually, it won't be 100% believable until it's happened. Up until then, it has to be trust and faith and belief in what's possible.
Yeah, so let me tell you a funny story. The first time I met Bob Proctor in person, I had joined his company as a thinking results consultant. And one of the first things he was talking about was taking your annual income and making it a monthly income. And so I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, I don't know what he said next, because I'm thinking, well, it's not possible, because even our superintendent in the schools doesn't make that kind of money. And there's no way I could do it. And then, about 5 minutes of thinking like that, and all of a sudden I was like, wait, you have just invested in becoming a business of your own. But you're stuck on that limiting belief of a system where there is a pay raise for how many years of service you have, and maybe, an incremental living wage, on top of it. And so that was where my thinking was. And so at that moment, I realized, okay, I've got to shift what I'm doing, because otherwise I will always think that's not believable.
Yeah.
And, so you challenge yourself, think about what your annual income is. What would your life be like if that was your monthly income instead? And just think of the things that you would do in that case. But you have to start to believe it. And until you believe it, it won't happen.
Absolutely. I am loving this conversation, because every single time we have a or we talk about a topic, you give the perfect example of how that happened. You once were in that environment and you recognized your own limiting beliefs as it happened. And that, I believe, is where our major power is, because when we can see ourselves in the moment faster and faster, now we can course correct. We have this internal GPS that is, our mind with our filter systems, it's with our energy. And so when we're listening to that, I bet you when Bob said, take your annual income and turn it into your monthly, you had a physical, guttural experience when the thought that you couldn't have that happened, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, because I could not see how possibly I could turn my annual income into monthly income.
What did it feel like when you had that thought?
It was almost like somebody had stabbed you in the stomach. It was like, I can't do it. It's not possible. And, and you do kind of reflect that, well, maybe he could do that, or maybe this person sitting beside me can do it, but I can't because I'm stuck in a system where, here's my next year's pay raise. I could look on a schedule and see what I was going to make the next year. So, I was so ingrained to that. And, I couldn't see beyond that, for those few minutes there until I was like, what am I thinking? Here I am listening to this man talk, and I'm stuck in that system.
But you used the power of awareness. You took a look at it. You, instead of allowing that somatic feeling to drag you down, which so many people do, they feel that feeling and then they think, oh, I reach for it and it's impossible. I give up. And it's just from that emotion, instead of that emotion, that guttural feeling saying, hey, you got a limiting belief here. Take a look at it. Shift your perspective. Take a look and see the polar opposite. Get resources. And you were in this beautiful supportive environment with Bob Proctor. And we're able to shift in the moment from not possible to possible to probable to make it happen.
Well, I think that's where a lot of people really fall short in their life because they don't do any type of personal development. They don't think beyond where they're at. And, the statistics out there of people who would even listen to a conversation like you and I are having are maybe 10% of the population, maybe 15 if we're really lucky. And so most people don't really go beyond, and they get worn down, because I always am amused, I guess, at graduation cards. Not that they're not lovely, telling people to live their dreams and, go after what they want in life. And how many people actually do? Very few. Because you get into the rat race of it all, and you get into that cycle like I was in the education world, and you think this is it. And sometimes people, I know that's where I was at after my son did go to college. I'm like, okay, because up to that point, I felt my biggest job was to raise my children, which I still think it was. But it was like, okay, now what do I do? What do I do for the rest of my life? And that's where I was. And so often I think people get stuck with thinking this is all there is to life. And there's so much more. And we have so much more potential inside of us, which is why I like, working with the people that I do, because I help them to find that potential and unleash it and realize that they can do so much more than they think they can do, because we have those blinders on and we have those limiting beliefs. And, we need to get out of that and, allow our minds to really go after what we really want instead of what we think we can have. And you never know where you can get to when you go after what you really want.
Absolutely. You just described the title of this podcast, Unlearn the Crap and Level Up. Your Soul is Calling. Your stage of raising your children was your purpose at that stage. But that was not an entire lifetime. It was just a part of your evolution. It was part of your creation. And when you were done that, now it's time to level up to the next level, where you unlearned your crap and changed your thoughts and feelings and beliefs, and then you leveled up again, where now you are helping others do the same. And so your story is such a beautiful example of personal empowerment and everything that this podcast stands for. I am so thrilled to have had you here as part of this conversation. Thank you so much, Patricia.
Oh, thank you, Kathy, for inviting me.
So before we wrap up, what would you say is the biggest shift that you have had in your own unlearning of crap that has made all the difference that you wish someone had have told you before?
I think just understanding how the law of attraction works and what's really the law of vibration, but understanding that. And I think what's really interesting about that is when I started explaining to my son what he had done, because the problem is we've all done this. We've all attracted things to us, but because we don't really understand it, we can't repeat it. Or we repeat it sporadically. So when I was explaining to my son what he had done so that he could do it again, he said, I mean, he was probably what, 22 maybe at the time. He says, well, I wish somebody had told me this a few years ago. And I'm thinking, I wish somebody had told me that decades ago, and helping to understand how we do create our own reality. Because like we've been talking about awareness, it's being unaware of what you're doing that got you to that successful step, and then we can't repeat it.
Yeah. When I think about what you're saying, the image that comes to my mind is standing in a courtyard of an old city, how there was always a center of town, and it was usually round. And if you are standing in the center of that, your reality of that is what you are looking at. But there's 360-degree perspectives that could be the same reality if you just change your sight line, your perspective. You could go from seeing maybe a building to a mountain to a lake. It all depends on what's there. And so we have everything available to us. And if we understand that our power is in on what we're focusing in on, in the direction we're looking at, and if it is not working for us, if it is not empowering us, all we have to do is change the perspective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's beautiful. I love that example. I could just picture it as you're talking about it. And it is just a matter of making those shifts. We just have to be aware of what's not working and then figure out how to make that shift so that it is working.
Absolutely. Now, I believe that everything requires feedback. It requires that mirror for us to be able to see our current perspective. Is that part of the value that you bring to clients, that you become the mirror back to them so that they can see what it is they're projecting out, so they can now have data and information to be able to make conscious decisions so that they can achieve their dreams?
Yes, it is. And, again, we live with ourselves 24/7. And it's hard for us to recognize the good that we have, the strengths, sometimes the strengths and weaknesses that we have, because we're around it all the time. And even, when I was in education again, I was picked to be a leader. And I didn't see myself as a leader, but my boss did. And thank goodness he did, because then he brought that piece out of me. So I don't think we always see in ourselves what others see in us. And that's why it's so important to have a mentor or a coach or somebody there to work with, because we're too familiar with who we are. And, even when people say they don't feel like they're good enough. Well, of course not, because you're always comparing yourself to somebody who's better than you are at something. But you have to see the good that you have and the strengths that you have, and then be able to see maybe, well, if you tweak this, then you'll have that success. And for years prior to when I started working with Bob and had started having my own coaches, I had the opportunity to have a coach, and I turned it down. And I turned it down because I didn't think I could afford it. And then looking back, I'm thinking, where could I be today had I had a coach 20 or 30 years before I did? And now I realize the mistake I made. Hindsight's
Absolutely.
2020,
Well, that is such a beautiful example of a conditioned response and automatic programming. The belief that I don't have the money, I can't create the money, that this can't happen. That is a perfect example that so many of us live with. And I believe that that's part of the conditioning responses that we've been taught is when we say, it's not for us, it's for other people, or we're not good enough, or whatever limiting beliefs we have been ingrained in us that it is a value to play small, that it is
Yeah.
a value to self-deprecate and say, oh no, like, you look beautiful today, Patricia. And for you to turn around and negate that and say, oh, this old thing, or whatever. We were taught that
Hmm.
because we were not taught to say, yes, I look fantastic. And by the way, you do look fantastic.
Thank you. I won't say,
Absolutely
oh,
love
this whole thing.
that. But that is part of what we were taught, and that is part of what we need to unlearn. Patricia, you have caught my attention with your $35,000 a month. Could you tell our audience how they can get their own copy of that?
Yes, so they can go to my site, which is at creatingtopproducers.com. And the $35,000 checklist it's a video and a guide that will walk you through the different thoughts, the different behaviors, and the actions that you need to take in order to make whatever your goal is. Like I said, it doesn't have to be 35,000, but what changes do you need to make in who you are so that it feels natural and it just feels automatic?
Absolutely. One of my other favorite mentors early on was T. Harv Eker, and another Canadian, and he talked about changing our set point. This free resource that you are giving our audience, which thank you, by the way, and I encourage everybody to go immediately to Patricia's website and get a copy of it, because you don't know what you don't know, and you don't know what is going to spark within you. But when we change our set point, we're changing the thermostat of what is acceptable and what is our new normal. Thank you so much for
Well, thank you,
sharing your
Kathy.
journey and your expertise and your insights. I know that you've made a huge difference to those who are listening. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Until next time, don't forget to challenge everything so that you can achieve anything, because your soul is calling you to level up and unlearn the crap, because the world is waiting for what only you can give. Until next time, I'm your host, Kathy Baldwin, and this is another episode of Unlearn the Crap and Level Up. Your soul is calling. I hope you enjoyed the conversation that I had with Patricia as much as I did. Patricia, as an entrepreneurial coach and mentor, showcased so many ways on how we don't know what we don't know, and how all of our creations are part of our journey, our evolution, our leveling up. I wanted to share with you a personal antidote, which I chose not to include in the interview, but I think showcases beautifully the Unlearn the Crap philosophy and how I have used Patricia's concepts of entrepreneurial and empowerment to also have my own evolution here. I just launched the third book of the Unlearn the Crap trilogy. It's called The Unlearned Life. And the whole premise of the book is that, yes, self knowledge and learning and self driving our own personal development is crucial, but integration is what makes the difference. And yes, I encourage you to find your coaches and your mentors, because there is nothing that replaces that human connection. But adding on to the tools, we can also bring in the latest technology to our own development. And that's what the unlearned life is all about. It's about integrating AI, ChatGPT into your personal journaling, your personal expression, your personal healing, so that you have those mirror, that reflection, to be able to level up and have it there for you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. I hope you'll grab your own copy of The Unlearned Life and utilize those resources for your own self-expression and leveling up. And I also wanted to showcase some other point that Patricia made that I think is really crucial. When I started my whole journey here, I could not envision that I was a best-selling author of 3 books. I could not envision that I would be a successful podcaster. And I could not envision the creation of Finally Podcast Automation System, which is born out of that entire evolution of stages that I went through. Finally, Podcast Automation System is something that I developed in order for me to level up in my own expression of my podcast. I took a look at all of the things that were draining or sucking my resources, things that weren't my own expertise. And I found a way to automate it, to systematize it. And I took that system and that automation and I bundled it together for other podcasters so that other people like me could go through their path and their journey of taking their voice, their mission, their passion in their podcast and changing the stats from being an 85% failure rate to an 85% success rate, because you have the systems and you have the automation behind you. If you are listening to this and you have a dream that's bigger than you are, I want you to know you're not going to see all of the stages and the steps that are coming before you. But all you need to do is take one step and let it lead you to the next step. And if you are looking for additional resources, I encourage you to find a mentor that you respond to, whether it's Patricia or any of the other coaches and mentors that we bring on and curate for this podcast, the Unlearn the Crap, so you can level up your Soul is Calling podcast. But also utilize the resources of the Unlearn Life and How I Unlearned My Crap and Unlearn the Crap and Level Up, all those books. And if you're a podcaster, if you are feeling overwhelmed by the back end work, by the 10 to 15 hours of back end work that it takes to produce and market and actually monetize your podcast so that it's not an expensive hobby, but it becomes a thriving, independent, profitable business, I encourage you to reach out and get some more information on the Finally Podcast Automation System. I am curating all of the people, resources, and tools so that each and every one of us find our inner empowerment and align with our true, authentic place, because our world requires each and every one of us to find our inner power. When we outsource that power to someone else, to a system, to a government, to a doctor, to anything other than our own selves, we are slowing down the evolution progress of our world and ourselves. And the world won't wait anymore. It is our time, and it is your time. And I encourage you to seek it. I hope you've enjoyed this episode, and I can't wait to see you on the next one.
If this hit home, don't just listen,
level up. Subscribe to the show. Drop me a 5-star review. Or share it with someone who's done playing small. Then head over to my website, kathybaldwin.me. That's where the real magic happens. You'll find my books, my podcast, and all the tools to help you reclaim your voice, rewrite your patterns, and level up into the version of you that you have been waiting for. Your soul isn't whispering anymore, it's roaring. And this is just the beginning.